Welcome back. Today, my goal is to do a quick review of the most important topics for your exam. Remember, Wednesday, we do not have a lecture, we do not have a meeting here. Wednesday, you go to Canvas using the logged-on browser, open your exam, 4:30, start working, and you have 75 minutes, the limit. 5:45, your exam is going to close. My recommendation, 4:30, the exam open, you can start with the configuration, the camera, the ID, and so on, everything that is related with the logged-on browser. And if you have 1 hour, 60 minutes for the exam, that is great. Average, 20 questions, more or less. You can have more or less, but it's going to be around 20 questions, and therefore, more or less 3 minutes per question to answer. You're going to have multiple choice questions, which you can answer in 1 minute very quickly, but also you're going to have open questions. For the open questions, programming. So probably you want to have more than 3 minutes to answer those, even though they are questions that are going to ask you for a small piece of source code, a few lines, 5 lines, 10 lines, 20 lines, worst case scenario, including enters and curly brackets. So you're going to have enough time. Usually, the previous semester, there are people finishing in 20 minutes, half an hour. So you can imagine if there are people finishing in half an hour and the exam is 1 hour, the exam is not so hard if you review everything. But again, you have 1 hour, so you can complete the exam, go back and forward with the questions, review everything. You remember, it's a closed book exam. You cannot use any material. Now, only is open during the lecture time. So again, if you are not in Arizona, if you are in a different time zone, please put an alarm or something. Do what you need to do. But exam is open only during the lecture time, Arizona time, 4:30, 5:45. So be sure to do not miss the exam. Remember, 25% of your grade. For the exam, I sent an email 1 hour, 2 hours ago to the people that haven't completed the sample exam. Please, if you haven't tested your equipment, if you haven't submitted the sample exam, please go ahead. Remember, if you use this the previous semester, your computer have updates, the software, the logged-on browser have updates. Test again. It's just 1 minute, a few seconds for you to enter to the link, check your software, submit the exam, be sure that everything is working, the camera is connecting, and so on. You do not want to be sending emails to IT department 4:30 next Wednesday, asking about what to do because you cannot enter or access your exam. So test your system before. You cannot imagine how many students send emails telling this was working the previous semester and it's not working anymore. That happened. That is the reason because we asked you to test. So go and complete the sample exam, please, if possible today. Tomorrow, I am going to be sending you emails to remind you to complete that part. You do not receive points or you do not lose points for that exam. It's 0 points that you can check on Canvas. However, it is important for you to do it to be sure that Wednesday, you are not going to have any issue. Wednesday, you are going to have this link, midterm exam with the full legend about responders. So that is the link that you need to complete Wednesday. Remember, you need an ID. As we mentioned before, your ASU ID, your passport, your driver license, whatever you have with your full name and your picture. You are going to be asked to show that to your camera. So have something with you, some ID that you can quickly show, and that's it. Remember, you're going to be asked to show your environment. Think about where are you going to be taking the exam. your room, the school, the university, the library, whatever. It's up to you, but remember, you cannot talk during the exam. Ask your roommates, I am in an exam, please give me 1 hour, whatever. Check your space. During the exam, you need to show your room, you need to show your desktop. Please keep your cellular phone far. Do not have with you any electronic device, your iPad, your phone, whatever. Be sure that they are not in your desktop. They are going to be flagged as suspicious because the system is going to think that you are using those devices to search for the answers. So be careful with that. As we mentioned before, you can use paper. It is okay to have scratch paper. Show the paper to the camera. Be sure that on the camera you show that the paper is white, empty. Nothing there. Nothing printed or notes, whatever. You cannot use any material during the exam. Your exam is closed book. Be sure that you do not have books in your desk, notes, electronic devices. Do not cover your ears. Do not use your earphones during the exam. Some people have asked me about, well, I need a microphone at the beginning and my earphones are my microphone. You can use it with the instructions at the beginning. But before starting the exam, when you have access to the exam, when you finish with the configuration, remove your earphones because they are going to be flagged as suspicious that you are somehow communicating with someone else. Be careful with that. You are not going to be required to draw anything. All your exam is in the computer. Everything is multiple choice. So the only thing that you need is select the options. And the second thing that you need is you're going to be asked to write source code. So nothing about drawing diagrams. There are going to be diagrams in the exam, but the diagrams are going to be there for you to read the diagram and maybe translate to source code or maybe multiple choice questions. I am going to show you several diagrams and you are going to select the one that is correct, but you are not going to draw. So the paper, you do not need the paper. I will not ask you to have paper with you mandatory. Some people ask me, can I have paper? Do I need paper? Because I like to put my ideas on paper, have something during the exam. It is okay. You can have paper, you can have a pen or pencil. I am not going to ask you to do anything that you need to submit for the exam on the paper. So it is really necessary? No, it's not necessary. You are okay with the computer. Good. So closed book, scratch paper are okay, not mandatory. As soon as you can, check your system, answer the sample exam, and you have also this document posted on Canvas. Please read the document, review the document. Several different things are covered in the document, instructions for you. If you have never took an exam online, that I don't think that is the case so far. I think you have taken several, including 360. But if you are not familiar with this, read the document. You're going to find several things there, including what about the music? What about the headphone? What about the room? What about the environment? What about talking? Take a look to the document before your exam. Anyway, we talked about this in the previous lecture. Today, what I want to talk about is the topics. What are you going to have there? As I mentioned before, your exam, average 20 questions, average 3 minutes per question. Questions open or multiple choice. For the open, two things, definitions and programming. I am not going to talk here about the definitions, but I think the ones related with programming are the most important. The questions that are going to have more points during your exam are these, the open questions related with programming. Those questions are going to be above 10 points. And I am talking about 0 to 100. These are the important ones. Those are the ones that you do not want to miss. Topics to review for those kind of questions, patterns, and object-oriented programming, obviously. be able to translate a class diagram to source code, be able to read instructions regarding patterns and create the source code that correspond to those patterns. In particular, decorator and observer. I asked you to do a practice in the previous lecture. I showed you this system with the yellow rectangles and the shadow and the blue ones. If you can complete that one, that could be a very good practice regarding using the patterns and the knowledge that you need to have about Java. Graphical user interfaces, basically. Review that, maybe the most important thing, because those questions have the most of the points. Now, in general, there are more questions, multiple choice, than open. However, 2 or 3 open make a big difference in your final grade. So review the programming. For the multiple choice, common question. You can have multiple choice in which you have the question and there are going to be, for the answers, this, the circles, the one that you only select one and that's it. You're going to have that kind of questions. Multiple choice question in which only one is the correct answer and the system is only allowing you to select one. Easy. You're going to have also multiple choice questions in which what you have is these boxes. Instead of the circles, the boxes in which you can select more than one. How many options do I need to select in this kind of questions? Only one? Is always more than one? It's up to you. If you have this kind of question, not just because they are checkboxes, that means that you need to select more than one. Be careful with that. Professor, I think that I need to select more than one just because the boxes. Select those that are correct. If there is only one correct, select one. If there are more than one correct, select all that apply. Is up to you. But the fact that they are boxes do not mean select more than one mandatory. One could be the correct answer. Just be aware of that. All these questions, all of them, when applied, they have partial credits. I think we mentioned this before, but all the questions, when it is possible to give partial credits, for instance, in this kind of question, the correct answer is to select 1 and 2, but you only select one, you're going to receive partial credit, you're going to receive half of the points, if that is the case. If selecting several and you select one, you could receive partial credits. So something that I will ask you is all the questions in your exam, when applied, the question already is going to be graded automatically. All these open questions are graded by the system, not by the TAs, not by me. So when applied, the system is going to give you partial credits, but not all the questions give you partial credits. And I am giving you this example just to make the point. Okay, you get the idea. And again, not because the answer is only one, your options are going to be circles. There are going to be questions like this, and even though you know that this is only one correct answer, well, check boxes, just to be sure that you know that there is only one correct answer. So for these questions, usually they are going to be 1 point, 3 points, 5 points. What I am telling you is there are different levels of difficulty in the questions that are multiple choice. There are questions that are very, very easy, true or false, the following statement, and that could give you 1 point or 3. There are other questions that are a little bit more complex, and those can give you 5. That is kind of 50% of one open question. The questions, all of them are in a pool. the question that you receive in your exam is randomly selected from the pool. So you can imagine in this random selection, you can have 19 questions, 80 questions, 20, 21. Use the number of questions that the system needs to give you a total of 100 points. And well, whether you have more questions of 3 points, or instead of 3, you have one with 5 or several with 1, somehow it's random, but all of you are going to be kind of in an average. So no one is going to have only questions with 5 points and 0 questions, 1 point. No one is going to have only 1 point questions with a lot of questions. There is kind of a balance, but you'd be aware that not all questions have the same value. Therefore, when you read the question, you have only 1 question on the screen. Just be careful that probably you want to use most of your time with the open because they are 10, 15 or something, and maybe answer quickly those that are simple multiple choice 1 point. Maybe go back and answer later or review later. Do not use a lot of time with that one that is 1 point and you are not sure about the answer. So take care of your time. Topics and some ideas of questions. I am going to mention something. I am going to share with you these slides. I just want to be sure that we agree that your exam includes everything that we review in the past 8 weeks, and today the review, week 9, but basically the lectures 1 to 15. So you have these 15 lectures online, these PowerPoints, and even the videos. You can review that for your exam. What I am going to mention here quickly is just the topics that I consider the most important, but this review is not comprehensive. I am not going to mention everything that is going to be in the exam. Everything that is going to be in the exam is in the lectures, 1 to 15, week 1 to 8, and today. You need to review that. So please, Professor, I didn't review that because you didn't mention that in the review. The review was not comprehensive. So that topic was in the lectures, 1 to 15. That topic can be in your exam. Topics after the disclaimer. Very good question in the chat. You are going to have open questions that include writing source code. Yes, for sure, you're going to have those. What about the syntaxes? Don't worry about the syntaxes. We are not going to compile your answers. So if you miss semicolon, parentheses, even if you make a mistake with the name of the variables or things like that, usually we do not penalize that. Those questions are reviewed by the graders, the TAs. So there is a human being reviewing those open questions. So we reviewed that you have the idea. We reviewed that you can follow the class diagram, that you remember the structure of the pattern. And obviously, those questions have partial credits. So for that kind of questions, you are going to receive points that could be full credit, 100%, or something partial. You are not going to miss points because syntax is error. Well, again, semicolon or something like that. We are not going to ask you for the imports. Don't worry. Usually, what I am going to ask you for is for one method or one class, things like that. We don't care about the imports. If you put the imports, good for you, but just read the question, and the question is going to mention what we are looking for. If something is not mentioned in the question, like we never ask for the imports, you can include it or not, it's optional, but whatever is mentioned in the question, like please put the method update here, you need to put that, or please complete this pattern, you need to include all the methods and all the classes that correspond to the pattern. So read the question, the extra things, the semicolons, don't worry for that. Yeah, both. Well, I'm not sure who is holding who is the TA that is holding the review, the undergrad TA or the grad TA, but they know the exam. Yes, they cannot share with you questions, no, but they know the exam. In particular, the undergrad TA, he was a student. He took the class, including the exam. So he could be a very good source of information. Again, he cannot share the questions or the exam, but he can give you an idea of what to study and the important things to do. The review session is going to be run by a TA. My recommendation is if one of you, anyone that is attending, can mention to him to record. Sometimes we can miss the recording. So you can ask for the recording to be done and we can share with you the recording, yes. No, I cannot share with you previous exams. Again, it's tricky thing, but I am not going to share with you previous exams, not before you take the exam. However, the goal for the review is for you to have an idea. So I am sharing with you this multiple choice, open questions. Your quizzes are a very good source of information. Any question in your quizzes can be your exam. So those are the things that you can review. If you want to check the format, that is the format. Use your quizzes. Imagine that you're answering your quizzes, but closed book. That is the scenario of your exam. Obviously, the difficulty of the questions is going to increase a little bit, but that is the scenario. Okay, topics. Summary of the most important topics that I would recommend you to check. And I summarize this in 7 tips. Basically, in 15 weeks, what we have reviewed is the following. And to be clear, we start talking about complexity. Week 1 and 2, basically theoretical background. If you go and review week 1, week 2, you're going to find the topic of complexity is the name of our lecture 2. And what we have there is a lot of material for multiple choice questions. Why I am telling you that this material for multiple choice questions? Because the questions that are going to be about this topic are going to be questions that are 1 to 3 points. My recommendation, obviously, is to review all of these topics. But what I want to tell you is which topics are more important and more relevant to be reviewed. Probably complexity is theoretical background, and it's a good idea to review. Could be the difference between an 80, 90 to the 100 is the thing that you want to review if you want an A+. But this is open question, multiple choice questions with low values, usually. So if by any chance, any of these topics you cannot review, probably the first one that I put out could be complexity. And I am going to give you the details of which topics, but well, complexity. Second, we review requirements. A lot of things about requirements. I am going to show you details. This one is important. This one is going to be for sure a lot of multiple choice questions with higher values than the topic 1. And probably for some of you, open questions. For some of you, an open question about doing, giving, writing a requirement, a functional requirement or a non-functional requirement for a particular paragraph. If you remember when I talked about the Pac-Man video game and later you do the homework about writing the requirements in a diagram, you can imagine that I can ask you for the requirements just without the diagram. Again, I am not going to ask you to draw the diagram, but I can tell you the actors and I can ask you for what could be one requirement, what's use case, one of the things that you can put in an oval connected with this particular actor. This is something in which you want to review not only the theoretical background, but also that you can use those topics in a practical way. You did it as a diagram for your exam, no diagram, but the topics apply in the same way. Use cases. The object model and the object-oriented programming. These two, probably the topics in which you are going to have most of the open questions. Programming. Programming what? Classes. Classes with relationships. Relationships, aggregation, composition, association, inheritance, realization. All of those things that we review in the class diagram, you're going to have questions like in the quizzes. Which one of the following are correct? And those are going to be questions with a considerable number of points, 3 to 5. But also, that is the core of the open questions. A lot of the open questions are programming, a lot of them connected with a diagram that you need to understand, or that diagram could be a pattern that you need to understand. If you can review only a few things, probably 3, 4, and 7, those 3 could be the core of the things that I recommend you to review. Those 3 are going to be the core of your exam. Classes, relationship between classes, and programming of that, design programming. And well, obviously, you remember that that is the beginning for the design patterns. Other than that, clean code. I am going to give you the details, but you remember dry, keys, and the guidelines. Several questions in your quizzes, several questions during the lectures is whether or not this source code is correct, whether or not this paragraph is following quiz, whether or not this is dry. You remember those examples in your quizzes? For sure. In your exam, again, correct, yes or no. Open questions is like, I can give you a source code that I know that is incorrect, like the examples that I show you in the lectures, and I can ask you to, can you fix this code? Can you write this method again, but applying keys and dry? So I know that this is incorrect. I know that this is not keys, not dry. Can you fix it? And sorry, for that question basically is that you can identify the problem and therefore know how to remove the problem. We reviewed several examples. If you can go back and review the slides at least, or even the recording of the lecture, this is important. Again, the easy open or the hard multiple choice is going to be there. My recommendation, assignment 1, 2, and 3 can help you to know if you're prepared for the topics 4, 3, 2, and 1. Your assignment 4 can help you to review if you're prepared with the topics 5 and 6. If you can do those assignments, if you can figure out your errors in those assignments in case you have anyone, you can figure out where you are regarding with the topics that I am listing here. We do not have any assignment connected with patterns, not yet. However, regarding with patterns, in the previous lecture, I asked you to do a practice. These 3 screenshots that I showed you. If you were able to do the practice, or if you can complete the practice in the following days, basically what I ask you to do is to implement Observer and Decorator with the graphical user interfaces in Java. If you can do this, that is a very good signal that you are prepared for the open questions regarding patterns. So this is kind of my big summary of things, details per topic. Regarding complexity, questions that you can have, what is analysis, what is design, what is a model? All those questions, multiple choice. So you do not need to memorize the definition. However, you need to be ready to select the correct answer. So what is a model, guys? Do you have an idea? Again, you do not need to memorize because it's not going to be an open question. You don't need to write everything. But what are the key ideas in a definition of what is a model? For instance, something, no idea. A model is an example of a model. Anyone? 60 people here. Someone have an idea of what is a model? A diagram maybe? Or the source code? A model, again, you do not need to memorize the definition. The model is the representation of a solution. Examples of models that we review, all your diagrams. Your diagrams are representation of what? The class diagram is the representation of your source code. Your use case diagram is the representation of your requirements and so on. Models, representations. And representations that include elements and the connection between those elements. Your use case diagrams have elements, the actors and the use cases, and connection between them, or use cases and connection between them. And we review the different kind of connections, similar for the class diagram. Anyway, I didn't read the definition for you, but key ideas, representation, elements, connections, those are the things that are going to be mentioned in the multiple choice. So you select the one that is correct. Question about what is analysis, what is design. The name of the class is analysis and design. So for sure, you're going to have the question, what is analysis, multiple choice, what is design, multiple choice. And the choices are going to be the same. It's just one of them is design, one of them is analysis. What is the difference between analysis and design? Can we explain the difference? Is there any difference about analysis, design in terms of software? Any idea? Analysis of the software, analysis of a system versus design of the software, design of the system. What is the difference between analysis and design? They are not the same. Hopefully, if the question is they are the same, the answer is false. What is the difference? I'm gonna go with that. Guys, analysis is about understanding the problem. Understanding the problem is about understanding the parts of the problems and the connection between those parts. Analysis is about, I have a problem. What are the things involved in that problem? Analysis is what you do when you are trying to understand your requirements. I want a piece of software that is the Pac-Man video game. Analysis is about understanding which are the parts that I need to solve in order to create that Pac-Man video game. Analysis is what you did when you create your use cases, your stories, understanding the problem. What about design? You are connecting design with the class diagram, design with the model. Design is about the solution. Analysis was about understanding the problem. Design is about create the solution. Create the solution. The first thing that we do to create a solution is a model of the solution. Why a model? Because the cost. It's easy to do a model, a blueprint, as you mentioned in the chat, instead of the product. The blueprint and the building is a very easy example. The cost of doing the blueprint is lower than the cost of going and building the thing from scratch. In software, this was the reason because we start talking about complexity. If you're doing a piece of software and that piece of software is a simple piece of software, you can go and start implementing your solution without these models, without this design. However, when you have complex systems, you do not do that. Again, the cost. Complexity and the challenge of complex systems. What makes a software system complex? What is the difference between a software that is complex and one that is not complex? One of the things, the size. What else? Lecture 2. If you have a piece of software, source code, which are the things that you review in order to know if that piece of software, that source code is complex or not? Number one, if you remember the size, the number of lines of code, a system that is big is considered complex. Big in terms of lines or classes or methods or models. The second thing, even though can be small, can even be complex. And we talk about cyclomatic complexity. We talk about the different paths, the different decisions that can be involved in one method. You can have one method with 10 lines, but it's not the same to have one method with 10 lines instructions or 10 lines conditions and loops. You can review it. Again, it uses theoretical background, easy points. Can you explain what is the composition? What is abstraction? What is encapsulation? Which relationship can exist between classes? 4 questions. Also, multiple choice. Do you remember the key ideas, the ones that can help you to answer? What is the composition? What is abstraction? What is encapsulation? Let's talk about this. Can you explain the difference between abstraction and encapsulation? Hopefully, yes. Which are the relationships between classes? If I give you a list, can you select all the ones that apply? Multiple choice, multiple selection. Which are the names of the relationship that you can create in classes? Do you remember aggregation, composition, association, realization, generalization, specialization, all of that? Kind of the subtopics and the connection with other topics. Easy one. More. Concepts, going into the detail of the first of the topics, analysis. Several of you are going to have this question that comes from one of the quizzes. A requirement is the same that a necessity, true or false? And the answer is going to be. And yeah, the chat is correct. Encapsulation is what is inside. Abstraction is what you chose to the outside. Yeah, false. Okay, hopefully everyone agree with the chat. If you have this question in your exam, a requirement is the same as a customer necessity, the answer is false. And we talk about that in a lecture, so you can go back and review the lecture, review the video, but necessities and requirements are not the same. Another question that you could have, open. What is a requirement? Open question, the first one that I mentioned here, what is a requirement? And one of the few that are not programming. A requirement is. Okay, hopefully in your exam you are answer. Okay, requirements, 2 things. Expected functionality, yes. I am going to give you the full answer that you can review later, but yeah. Key idea. If you are asked about requirements in general, just remember that there are two types of requirements, functional and non-functional. The functional ones are services, functionalities, behaviors that the system offers. The non-functional ones are the qualities and the constraints. So just be sure that you remember which one is what, which one are the functionals, which one are the non-functional, and just remember that both are requirements. So the requirements in general can involve services, behaviors, functionalities, and those are the functional requirements, obviously. Also can involve constraints and qualities, and those are the non-functional requirements. They are requirements. The category non-functional requirements. And you know how to identify them. You know how to document them. So talking about documentation of the requirements, we review use case diagrams. You know what is an actor, you know what is a use case. Moreover, you know about the relationship between the use cases and the relationship between the actors. In particular, maybe the most important, well, not the most important, but the most difficult to remember is when to use include, when to use extend. Remember, you have this slide that I share with you with questions in which you know how to check. If you have two requirements, if you have two use cases and they are connected, which is the best connection between them? Should it be include? Should it be extend? Or should it be just a line that is not extend, not include? The three options are going to be multiple choice. I give you the diagram, I give you the circles, I give you the actor, and I tell you, we need to connect these two circles, which is the best connection. And the options is include, extend, nothing, not all of them. Be sure to review which one is what. Classical example that you reviewed before, we need to draw the maze for the Pac-Man, and well, we need to draw the Pac-Man. I am talking just about drawing, so it's just a very particular case. Or you have a car, and that car have an engine. I am talking about having that particular element. Between car and engine, can we use include or extend? And if so, which one? Car include engine, engine include car, car extend engine, engine extend car. I give you 4 options. Which one are you going to select in your exam, like the correct one? Car include engine. There is a connection between car and engine. I can agree with that. They are connected. They are connected, and they are connected as an inclusion. Yes, extend is for optional things. In this case, we are not talking between the car and the engine. We are not talking about optional things. The thing that we reviewed before is we assume that it's mandatory for a car to have an engine. So this one can be a good example of include. Creating a car or having a car, include creating or having an engine. Just to give you a quick example. If we're going to use include, there is an arrowhead. The arrowhead is going to be pointing to engine, or the arrowhead is going to be pointing to car. That is another part of the question. Good. Okay, so agree with the chat. Glad to have the answer. Something like this. I just give you car and engine. But you can review several examples that I share with you in the slides. Again, I mentioned 2 circles, I mentioned 2 requirements. The question is, they need to be connected? Yes. How? and the how is these relationships. Is the dots. So global idea. Now, the key idea, because it's not extend, is remember, when you talk about extending, you are talking about something optional. For this example, neither the engine is optional, not the rest of the car. So when both things are needed, when none of them is optional, what you have is an inclusion. Both parts are important, they should be connected, inclusion. So there are these questions that you can review regarding exactly this. You need to ask, this is optional, yes or no, this can exist, yes or no, they should be connected, yes or no. Do not confuse inclusion and extension with use cases, with requirements, with what happened with classes. So be sure to identify one for the analysis and the ones that we follow with classes. Yeah, of course, you're going to have questions in UML with the relationship between classes, including inheritance in all the different variants, realization, specialization, and generalization. So yeah, you're going to have those. Activity diagrams and state diagrams, please review them. I am assuming that you know how to do it, even though these are 360, we review quickly them. You can use them. They are tools, just like I am going to ask you about Java programming, is something that you do not learn here, but we have been using. So you can have some question that ask you not to do one, but to use one or to read one and understand, and using that one to provide an answer for something. So be sure that you understand these guys, also that you can program something in Java. So next, this is maybe the 4 more important points regarding analysis, regarding requirements. It's not the only thing, but again, the most important ones. What is the difference between an activity and a requirement? Or they are the same, activity and requirement? And I am asking because the activity diagrams. Activities versus requirements, they are the same, yes or no? A requirement is the same as an activity. I am waiting for a yes or no, someone. Activity, requirement. Be careful, no. You have activity diagrams to represent activities. What is an activity? Which are the activities that you represent in the activity diagram? Do you remember? 3 in particular. The activities are conditions, loops, instructions. Do you remember the diamonds and the boxes? The activities are conditions, loops, instructions. Is the same to the requirement? No. The requirements are the functionalities that you mentioned before, right? The activity diagrams are inside of one requirement. One requirement is going to create several tasks. The tasks are the things that you are going to program with loops, instructions, and loops. They are not the same. The requirement, the functionality that you are going to implement. One functionality, several tasks. Each task, several instructions. Functionality, task, instructions. Check that. Good. The actions that the program takes. Those actions are the task. Several tasks, one requirement. So not the same. Good. Moving, next topic. Talking about objects. We go to object-oriented analysis, object-oriented design, object-oriented programming. There is a particular slide in which I describe to you the difference between analysis, design, and programming, in particular under the object-oriented paradigm review. And obviously, analysis, design, and programming are not the same. key topic, something that you need to review, mandatory, the class diagram. And the class diagram, and I am talking about plus, minus, something that is with underline, these boxes, what do you put here? What do you put here? And obviously, all these connections which one is what and how do you use them? Again, maybe the most important topic. If you need to select one thing to study, obviously you're not going to get full credit, but at least the best of the grades possible for studying only one thing, this could be your topic, understanding this. Why? Because this is going to help you to at least more or less have an idea about patterns, at least more or less to answer not only multiple choice questions, but also open questions. So that is the reason because I am giving this particular topic kind of a high relevance because, well, it's connected with the question with more points, but also, even though you do not review the other topics, at least you are going to be able to have an idea about what is the question, and therefore maybe you can provide kind of a partial answer for some programming or something, and well, get some points. This, which one is association, which one is aggregation and composition, the difference between aggregation and composition. Question in your exam, what is the difference between aggregation and composition? Aggregation is, composition is, they are the same. They are both the ones with the diamonds. One is the diamond white, the other is the diamond black, but the difference, almost. Exactly. If you want to remember one thing, I like this one, the null. Both ask you to have a global variable. Both are relationships that are related with having something. One class has an attribute from another class. Both share that. However, one of them allows you to have the other thing or not, like optional, having the value null, and the other do not allow you that. Similar example that before, I think we review car, we review library, and we review book. And we agreed that, well, library is connected with book. Something that we review is where should be the diamond. The diamond is in the class that is the most important. The most important is the one that is the owner of things. So the library is the owner of the book. The library is the one that is handling the book. The car is the owner of the wheels. The car is the owner of the engine. So the diamond is going to be there. However, aggregation and composition, we talk about this idea, the library is the library with and without books. And some of you tell me, yeah, I mean, we can remove all the books from the library and still we call it the library, an empty library. So when we have that idea, we are talking about aggregation. We are talking about the thing at the end could be null, do not exist. And when that is possible, aggregation is the relationship, and that is represented with this diamond white. So aggregation. With the car, if we apply the same ideas, before we described that the car should have an engine, and in that point, we're talking about composition. We do not accept the null for this particular relationship. We do not accept that the car can be related with a null empty engine. If we do not accept the null, we're talking about composition. And we represent that with the black diamond. So between the car and the engine, mandatory that exists the engine, mandatory that exists the car. So we put composition. Between the car and the wheels, or between the library and the books, the wheels can be null. A car is still a car even though you do not have the wheels. The library is still the library even though you do not have books. White diamond, aggregation. Just remember those ideas. In the patterns, remember the decorator, we use aggregation, and we use aggregation because the core element, any of the ones that we review, that one can exist with null decorations, or we can add decorations. But if we do not add the decorations, the object still is important. The object still exists. White diamond for the decorator pattern. Very good question. Remember, we have the line and we have the line with the arrow. Important thing, if you have a line, if I have this one, a line that connects A and B with the arrow, what is this in source code? If I give you the class A, the class B, and I connect with the line, in the source code, what I need to have, what I should have. That one is association, right? I have association between A and B. That association in the source code is going to be what? A variable, or implement, extend, or what option do I have? Variables with the diamonds. The diamonds are the ones that represent the variables. No diamond here is going to be a local variable, yes. So variables global, the diamonds. Variables local, and something else, the line. What is the something else? Remember, the line, the association is, yes, probably you're going to have a variable. Yeah, that variable is going to be local. The only reason because you create a local variable, an object that is local, is because you want to call a method inside of the class that you are creating the object, right? I mean, there is no reason for creating an object if you're not going to put the object to work. And in order to put the object to work, you call a method. So association, the line with the arrow, basically mean that I am going to have a class A. That class A is going to have a method, whatever is the name of the method. Inside of that, I am going to have a local variable B, for instance. And what I am going to use B to call some kind of action in the other class. So this local variable calling a method is this relationship from A to B. Obviously, if we do the class B, what I have in class B is going to be a method, and that method is the method action, void or whatever, that do something, because I need the method in order to call the method. So this is the source code that corresponds to something as simple as A and B connected with an arrow. Notice that I do not care about the name of the methods. I do not care about the names of the variables. That information is not in the diagram. What I care is the meaning of the arrow. Now, again, guys, probably the most important thing for you to remember: global variables, diamonds, solid line in inheritance, extend, dash line with inheritance, implements, the lines with or without the arrowhead, calling a method. That is source code from the blueprint. The PowerPoint is not on Canvas, not yet. Good. Okay, now moving forward, just to close, something that I need you to know, and I am assuming that you know because you did your assignments, but just in case you receive help for your assignments for the exam, please review Java Swing. In particular, I am assuming that you're familiar with frames, panels, and listeners. Those things are going to be there in the questions, probably in the open ones. Those are things that I will ask you to program because I am assuming that you know you have implemented several programs with that before. So if for any reason in your homework you receive help, be sure that you review how to do this because you are going to need them in your exam. Java Swing, AWT, I could add here that you have experience, you know, the class graphics, paint component, obviously. Moreover, that you're familiar with the graphics, the draw method. So like in the example that I asked you to review before, the practice that you can draw on a screen, this blue rectangle or yellow rectangles or something like that, you're familiar with the XY position and how to use the paint component with the graphics and with this method in order to put something on the screen in a panel. Timer, particularly you use this with the observer. I show you this example with the source of information with a class boss. How to have multi-threading with the timer. That is something that we review. Please take a look at these classes. Serializable is something that I'm not going to ask you to program. However, remember that something that we reviewed, theoretical background for the multiple choice questions, persistency. Do you remember? Concurrency, persistency, encapsulation, abstraction, and so on. Please review those concepts. They can be in your exam. But talking about programming, those 4 things: Swing, AWT, drawing things, and multi-threading with timers. I mentioned this. Keys, dry, Javadoc. A few questions in your exam, again, identify if some source code is keys dry. Remember that, we mentioned this at the beginning, but also maybe one question with a few points, again, not the most important part, but one question, open question, few points there, 3 points maybe, create the Javadoc for a class or for a method. So I will ask you for a paragraph, and what we are going to review is that you follow the structure for a Javadoc, the number of asterisk, what is going to be first, the author or the description, can you use parameter, return, and so on. One Javadoc for a class or for a method. That is something that some of you are going to have there. The dry and the quiz and the keys, we reviewed that in a full lecture, so maybe you want to go back and review this. A few questions about it. The live 5, again, that one. It uses the principles that we review. Remember, abstraction and encapsulation. I mentioned that before. I asked you about if you can explain the difference. Hierarchical relationships, we already mentioned them. All of this. Polymorphic behavior, you need inheritance for that one. We talk about what was polymorphism, and concurrency and persistency. Persistency with serializable, concurrency, you need to know the definition, but in programming, the only thing that I'm going to ask you is timer tasks, not runnable and threads yet. Good. So 5, 6, and just to finish, patterns. Please review, obviously, concepts, obviously what is a pattern, obviously about the categories of the patterns. Do you remember how many categories do we have? Can you explain those categories? Can you select in a multiple choice which is the definition of each category? Creational patterns to create objects, behavioral patterns to define the functionality of the objects, structural patterns to connect objects. The 3 categories, the definition. Moreover, in particular, and connected with the relationship that I mentioned, the second most important topic, be sure that you understand and can program the observer and the decorator pattern. I just eliminate this one. So observer and decorator. Be sure that you understand the source code for those two and the diagrams. If you work in the project that I mentioned in the previous lecture, if you complete this blue rectangle, yellow rectangle, the shadow, and so on, what I ask you to do there is basically an observer and a decorator. If you can do that by yourselves, I think you are ready for the exam. If you have any question, please, tomorrow you have a review with the TA, you can send an email to the TA, you can send an email to me. Be sure that you can do this, not only theoretical, but practical. Here are the points for your open questions. Here are your programming questions. Not only this, the one that I mentioned before with the relationship, but you can think about one or two with relationships, one or two with patterns, the two most important topics. And that's it. Any question, guys? Okay, I am going to publish the slides in the following hours, and later tonight, I am going to be posting the video. So hopefully you can review it. Any question, please let us know. And remember, next lecture, you do not connect to Zoom. Next lecture, we do not have a meeting. Just go to Canvas and complete your exam. Thank you. See you.